Hi, I'm Paul Brodie. We're back in my shop. There's a man behind the cameras, Mitch. Thank you. We're in the midst of handlebar. I'm in the midst of handlebar stems here. These are the quill stems because they have a quill. And I've told people I started this project last year, and then it got stalled out because I got sick. So I'm making 17 stems, and I've told people that this is the last of the stems, of the quill stems. On a stem, it has names. Each tube has a name. This is the clamp tube. It clamps the handlebar. This is the extension tube because it comes away from the quill tube, and this is the quill tube. And so one of the reasons why I'm not going to make any more stems after this 17 stems, that's how many stems are in production here, is because of the quill tube. It used to be that you could just buy a quill tube. Well, you can't do that anymore because who's making quill stems? Not many people. So here's some 7/8 tubing. It's chromoly. If I measure it, well, it's right on size, 875. Sometimes it's a little bit oversized, couple thou. There you go, half a thou over. It doesn't fit in the fork. See that? Well, it does kind of, but there's no extra play in there. And you need a little bit of extra play because if this tube is a little bit smaller, that's not going to fit. So this is a quill tube, and if I measure it, so 872, 871. So how do I make a quill tube? I order a length of chromoly. I have to order a 20-foot length. It's called a random length, so it could be 20 feet, it could be 24 feet. You don't know until it actually comes into the metal depot. And then I cut it like that. I cut it this long. I face the ends. I send it out to the grinder. And what he does is centerless grinding. There's some kind of I don't know if it's bronze or brass, so it's some kind of a pad, and it holds it up to the grinding wheel, and the grinding wheels are here. And it takes it down evenly, and you end up with an undersized tube so that it fits into the fork. And then when I get it back to my shop, I put it in the hacksaw, and I cut it at the angle of the wedge or the taper. So, and then hopefully I get them the same length. So that's how I end up with these. And after making stems for several years now, off and on, it's not a full-time job at all, I got down to all the quills. So I have different sizes. I got inch and an eighth. Those are for the two different sizes of fork. And so I put the word out, and these are all sold. So I just have to finish the job now. First step is to, when I'm making a stem, is to cut the length of the extension tube, and then it gets mitered in the mill, and then I make up these clamp tubes, and it gets TIG welded on, and then it gets squashed in the arbor press, and I have a fixture. I have a little piece of metal that only allows the ram to go down so far, so I get a consistency here in the size. So this, can you see how it's basically the same size? And we're going to talk about the welding and the brazing and why I do it that way, because I've got a little bit of a reason why I'm doing it that way. After that, we have to make a hole that's at an angle in the right position. So I'm going to show you the fixture, and that's where the ICR, we call this ICR, internal cable routing, and it fits in there like so. And then I've got some fixtures here which bends it. I'm going to bend one up, and I'm going to insert the tube. so that you can see how that works. Internal cable routing, it definitely is extra work. It's not simple. I'll grab the fixture to show you how this hole is made. Making the fixture and figuring out how it works in the mill, that was about 1 day's work, a whole day's work. So this gets held in the vise in the mill, and this fits over here. So this is a certain angle, and I put a center drill into here, and I've got a marking here of 2.5 inches. So when I hold it in the mill, let's say this is a center drill, I move it up and I move this over 2.5 inches. That is about the right spacing. It just gives me an indication of where I'm going to for this, to make this hole. I've got a center drill. That's what a center drill looks like. It's a 3/8, and I thought this is going to work fine because this is fairly robust. It doesn't flex much. And so I came down, and what happens is, because this is at an angle, it wants to force the center drill out. And it didn't take long. I only made a couple holes, I think, and the end snapped off. It didn't like going in at an angle. So I thought, well, it's a brand new center drill. So what I did was to sharpen it. I took off the end piece, and I kind of made a little bit of a radius and a cutting edge down there, and that worked fine. I've done quite a lot of stems with that. But as it's coming down, here's the chuck. As it comes down, it flexes out. So what I did was to make this bolts onto the table, goes about like that, and this has a big chunk of metal here so it doesn't flex. And that's basically how it works. We've got a little video that Mitch is going to show, and it shows how it comes down. A little bit of cutting oil, you're going to see a little bit of smoke, and that's how that hole gets cut at an angle. I like that process. It works pretty well. This is a hydraulic tube. It's 3/16 OD. And then I make up a little cable stop, and it gets nickel silvered on. So that's the process there. I've got some cardboard templates, and I've got one for each angle of the stems, because this is a guide to help me with this, because I got 6 different rises of the stem. The rise is the angle of the extension tube. And then we also have the different lengths. So one stem, it might not have the same bend as another stem. So this helps me. So on the end of the stem, I got a 15-degree stem. That's the rise, and it's a 150. So I go into, okay, I got 15 here. So the stem fits like that. And so I made up this. This helps. It just slides. So I've got the bend here, and the bend is made using this fixture here. So when I put this on, and what I've done is, there's the slot, and the slot is basically here to here. You can see that. So I need to figure out how this fits the best. So you see how I'm pulling this back? Like that. So that's basically what I want. So this one has a little bit of a straight section right here. How this works, this is the bend or the radius, and then I've got a piece of aluminum, 6061, and it's got an angle here. So that's what wedges it in there, like that. So I'm gonna bend this, and we'll see how it works out. And I've got this piece here. This fits into the cable stop, and that allows me to bend it a little nicer because I don't have to put as much force on my fingers. So I'm not holding it out here because that would want to bend it there, but I've got, see how it bends quite nicely? And I can always put more bend on. A little bit harder to take off the bend. So let's see how we're doing here. Okay, so it looks like I need a little bit more bend there. It's trial and error somewhat, just seeing how it works, putting a little bit more bend. So here we go, a little bit more bend. And you can see here on previous times I've made a mark there for how far I'm bending it. But these are all different sizes of stem. So, okay, so that looks good. So I'm going to make a mark because I've got excess here. So I'm going to cut it right there. We're going to go over to the hacksaw now. We're going to cut that off there because this makes it hard. If that piece is still on there, it makes it harder to insert it into the extension tube. See how this comes in at an angle like that, and then this has to be bent. Or if that's straight, then this piece has to be bent. So I made up a little fixture here. Can you see how this works? This is a holder. You could call it a hook of some kind, like on a surface table. And you see there's a radius there. So I'm going to form it down there. I could hold this in the vise, but it doesn't take that much force. Can you see it bending? There we go. So now I've got an angle. It's got a little bit of an angle. It's not a kink. It's got a nice radius. So there's a lot of little fixtures and stuff building stems. Maybe you think that stems are real easy to build, but I don't have that experience. They're kind of tricky little things to make nicely. Okay, so this is feeding it through. There we go. And then I can use this as well. Can you see how there's a little bit of a gap here? So I can use this to bend this. See it move? And then what else I can do, if I apply a little bit of force here, because this has to go in a little bit, and that has to come up a little bit too. So yeah, see it come up? So what I'm looking at now is I'm looking for the space here. And there's basically almost no space there. So it'll be easy for the nickel silver to flow around that. That's not going to be a problem. So that looks pretty good to me. And then looking inside, if you can look inside, can you see how the tube is coming up straight? It's not coming at an angle. So the second bend we did using this, that worked out quite nicely. Okay, so I've got some masking tape and I put this on like so. What I want to do, I'm eyeballing this flat and this, because I don't want it like that or like that. I want it to be as level as possible, and it's kind of tricky to... So am I still looking good? Yep, that looks good. If I was to build an actual fixture to hold this, I'm not sure how I'd build it. And masking tape is pretty cheap. So I'm eyeballing this and that. And you see here how much... See that space there? That's the space for the fillet brazing, because it's got to come there. It's got to be a nice little fillet. You don't want it too high or too low. We're going to go over to the TIG welder now, and I'll do a little TIG tack on both sides. Okay. So I'm going to TIG weld down the sides, but let's go over to the bench. I'm going to explain why I do that, okay? In fillet brazing, there's a rule of thumb that if you're joining one metal onto another, you need about 1/8 of an inch gap. So for example, if I'm joining the extension tube onto the Quill tube, and I'm only using a bronze rod, this is what it should look like. I want you to see this. This is basically what it should look like. So can you see here? There's 1/8 of an inch gap, because that's what makes it a strong braze, because as the fillet goes over there, you've got all that metal. Well, I don't want that look, and the look that I want looks like this. I want it to be smooth. So what that means is that, you can see here, so it basically matches. So if you fillet braze that, I know from experience that I'll get a crack. Sooner or later, because of the flexing, you know, you have the weight of the rider on the handlebars, and there's a little bit of flex. It's going to crack at some point on one side or the other, or both. So that's why I do the TIG welding. It's kind of cheating in a way, but I'm achieving the look that I want. And when it's all said and done, it looks like a fillet braze. So that's why I do from here to here, I do a TIG weld. That is TIG right there. So I just wanted to show you what the difference is, and it's a look. And it's the same thing here. This tube, the clamp tube, is the same size as the extension tube, 1 1/8". So that's why I do a little TIG weld over there as well, and then I go right over it. See, like, you can't tell that there's a TIG weld under that, can you? So it's all good. Let's go back and I'll do a little TIG weld. It's a little TIG weld, and it's on the area where the two tubes are the same width. I'm adding flux. I nickel silver this little guy first. Okay, so what happens here is the cable stop goes inside the extension tube. So this is a little bit of a heavier wall here, so you have to warm up this. It's easier to braze nickel silver around here. It's harder to do this because these often end up being two different heats, just because of how they are. And this is a really shallow angle. So this is the tricky spot from here to here. This is relatively easy in comparison. So first we'll do this guy here. So I'm just resting it on a piece of metal here because I want this to be level here. That's what my goal is. I want levelness. So the extension tube is taking more heat than the little 3/16 hydraulic tube. So I've done a little preheat. So I get the nickel silver around, and then I'll flow it in at the end so it's very smooth. I'm using the fixture which is used to make the hole in the mill, but everything's the right height here. So and it just easy to put on. So this is level now. So I'm going to heat this up. I'll start up front here, and then I'll finish up at the back, flow it in. So it looked like they were both up to heat because it spread evenly on both pieces. That's a good sign. So this is the tricky bit. Okay. And you see what I'm doing? I'm resting my elbow here. That helps. Okay, so now I can flow it in. Here's my fixture for brazing. I've got a rectangular piece of tube, and so it fits both sizes of the quill, the 7/8 and the inch quill. So because otherwise, how do you hold this? It doesn't have a place to hold. So this is how this works, like that. And now in the park stand, I can rotate it to whatever angle I want. When you fillet brazing, you always want it to be level and flat because it's gravity you're working with or against. That helps the fillet braze to be level, smooth. So that's what we're going to do. Now people are always asking what kind of rods, and I know we've said this before, but this is the nickel silver rod, and on the spec sheet it's got the different percentages of silver. Now I bought these rods off a local supplier quite a while ago, and the salesman, he couldn't remember if he sold me 0% silver or 2 or 4. So he thinks he sold me the 0%, so we're going to go with that. So nickel silver, 16th inch, and then after that we got the bare bronze brazing rod. It's not coated because got the automatic fluxer down here, putting the flux on as well as the paste flux. So the paste flux we're using is this. It's a type B bronze. It's from the Gas Flux Company. Yep, Gas Flux Company in El Rio, Ohio, however you pronounce that. I did learn at one point, I forgot now. So the flux and the 2 rods. So I use the nickel silver rod because it flows nicely into that little space there. And then after that, use the bare bronze rod. So let's get started here. A little bit of preheat. I got a pretty hot flame here, but I'm just being very careful with it. And you can see the nickel silver just flow. And I just go up to the TIG weld. I don't need to go over the TIG weld. And then we switch rods. We don't have to let it cool down. We don't need to reflux. I've been asked this question a few times. No, once you finish with the nickel silver rod, you grab that bare bronze rod and you start fillet brazing right away. Otherwise, if you let it cool down, it's a waste of oxy-acetylene having to reheat. So you don't want to do that. So fillet brazing is a little bit like, I've said it before, a little bit like Army golf. Left, right, left, right. You put a little bit on one side, a little bit on the other side, and as you're doing that, it allows the other side to cool down momentarily. So you have a little bit more control because the whole thing is not just molten. And you notice that the cone is quite close. So I'm moving it so that this is horizontal, and where I'm applying, that's the vertical aspect of it. Because you don't want to fight gravity. You might win sometimes, but not every time. So can you see how I'm swapping back and forth on the sides? A little hole in the middle. There we go. Each of these fillet braises might take me, I don't know, somewhere between 10, 15 minutes, something like that. If you're taking an hour, you're taking way too long. And you notice how much I keep moving it? I do a little bit, then I have to move it. Because otherwise I'll be out of angle. And the braise will be drooping possibly. So it's important to move it to get it horizontal where you're going to be braising. Mitch and I would like to thank you very much for hanging out in the shop here. It was fun working on stems, showing you the process of what's involved. Mitch and I like coffee. If you buy us some coffees, that'd be much appreciated. We also have merchandise for sale. Until next time, take care, see you. Illyria, thank you, Mitch.